The growing tension in Vietnam-China relations is capturing global attention as Vietnam increasingly pushes back against China's territorial and economic dominance. With centuries of shared history marked by both cooperation and conflict, the two nations now find themselves at a critical juncture. Vietnam's government is actively pursuing strategies to assert its sovereignty and reduce its reliance on its northern neighbor, while simultaneously navigating the complex dynamics of regional stability. Can Vietnam truly break free from China's influence, or is it an inescapable part of the nation's geopolitical reality? Let's find the answer in this video. The historical relationship between Vietnam and China spans over 2 millennia, characterized by periods of both cooperation and conflict. China's colonization of North Vietnam, lasting from 111 BC until 939 AD, marked the beginning of a complex relationship that would shape regional dynamics for centuries to come. During the millennium-long colonization period, Vietnamese resistance against Chinese rule remained persistent until 939 AD, when No Quyen achieved independence by defeating weakened Chinese forces. The subsequent centuries saw Vietnam maintaining a tributary relationship with China while preserving its autonomy, though territorial disputes continued to simmer beneath the surface of diplomatic relations. The modern era brought renewed tensions, particularly in the South China Sea. Territorial conflicts include the 1974 Battle of the Paracel Islands, resulting in China's complete control of the archipelago. The 1979 Sino-Vietnamese War caused approximately 30,000 casualties, and the 1988 Johnson-South Reef skirmish led to 66 Vietnamese casualties. The relationship reached its lowest point during the 1980s when both nations engaged in border conflicts and maritime disputes. Despite China's previous support for Vietnam during its wars against France and the United States, ideological solidarity proved insufficient to prevent military confrontations. The normalization of relations in 1991 marked a new chapter in Vietnam-China relations, though underlying tensions persisted. A 2014 Pew Research survey revealed that 84% of Vietnamese expressed concern about potential military conflicts arising from South China Sea disputes. The territorial disputes remain particularly contentious, with Vietnam maintaining claims over both the Paracel and Spratly Islands, while facing increasing Chinese assertiveness in the region. Recent years have witnessed Vietnam adopting a strategic approach termed bamboo diplomacy, allowing flexibility in its response to Chinese actions while steadily strengthening military infrastructure on its controlled islands. This delicate balancing act reflects Vietnam's effort to maintain regional stability while protecting its sovereign interests, though historical tensions continue to influence contemporary diplomatic relations between the two nations. Vietnam's economic relationship with China presents a complex web of dependencies and vulnerabilities that shape modern Vietnam-China relations. The bilateral trade between the two nations reached $171.2 billion in 2023, highlighting the deep economic ties that bind these neighboring countries. The trade relationship between Vietnam and China remains starkly imbalanced, heavily favoring China, and leaving Vietnam with a significant and growing deficit. In the first half of 2024, bilateral trade between the two nations nearly reached a staggering $100 billion, highlighting the scale and intensity of their economic interactions. However, this figure underscores a troubling disparity. Vietnam's exports to China amounted to only $27.80 billion during this period, while imports from China soared to $67.00 billion. This surge in imports has caused Vietnam's trade deficit with its northern neighbor to expand dramatically, reaching $39.20 billion, a staggering 67.9% increase compared to previous periods. The widening gap not only reflects the asymmetry in the trade relationship but also raises pressing concerns about Vietnam's economic reliance on Chinese goods and materials. Vietnam's manufacturing sector faces substantial vulnerabilities due to its dependence on Chinese imports. Nearly 70% of trade between both countries consists of intermediate goods, creating a precarious situation for Vietnam's production capabilities. The ratio of imported input products in Vietnam's intermediate costs significantly exceeds China's, demonstrating the asymmetric nature of their economic relationship. Chinese imports dominate crucial sectors, with China accounting for 39% of Vietnam's electronics imports. This dependency extends to essential manufacturing inputs, including machinery, equipment, chemicals, and raw materials, making Vietnam's industrial sector particularly vulnerable to supply chain disruptions. Vietnam has actively pursued economic diversification through multiple free trade agreements. As of August 2021, Vietnam participated in 15 FTAs, including 6 ASEAN FTAs with regional partners. The country has emerged as an attractive alternative manufacturing destination, offering labor costs approximately 40% lower than China. The nation's strategic position has attracted major international corporations seeking to implement China Plus One strategies. This approach has led to increased foreign direct investment, with Vietnam becoming a premium site for companies looking to expand or relocate their manufacturing operations. However, the transition faces challenges as Vietnam's trade deficit with China continues to widen, reaching $50 billion in 2023, representing a nearly 50% increase over 5 years. The South China Sea has emerged as a critical flashpoint in Vietnam-China relations, with both nations intensifying their territorial claims and military presence in the disputed waters. Vietnam's recent acceleration of land reclamation activities has dramatically transformed the maritime landscape, with the country creating more than 1,000 acres of new land in the Spratlys since early 2024. The ongoing territorial dispute in the South China Sea revolves around several key maritime features, with the Paracel Islands, the Spratly Islands, and Scarborough Shoal at the center of contention. The Paracel Islands, fully occupied by China since 1974, remain a flashpoint, as Vietnam continues to assert its sovereignty over the area. Meanwhile, the Spratly Islands, a sprawling collection of reefs and islets, are divided among multiple claimants, including Vietnam, China, the Philippines, and others, creating a complex web of competing territorial ambitions. Scarborough Shoal, another critical feature, remains hotly contested, particularly between China and the Philippines, though it also features in Vietnam's broader claims in the region. In recent years, Vietnam has significantly bolstered its presence in the Spratly Islands, demonstrating a clear commitment to defending its territorial claims. Through extensive land reclamation efforts, Vietnam has expanded its holdings in the Spratlys by a remarkable tenfold within just 3 years. One of the most striking examples of this development is at Bar Canada Reef, where Vietnam has doubled the land area to an impressive 492 acres since November. This makes it Vietnam's largest and most strategically important outpost in the Spratly Islands, underscoring the nation's resolve to maintain a foothold in this highly contested region. The Head 981 incident in 2014 marked one of the most severe maritime standoffs between Vietnam and China since 1991. This confrontation fundamentally altered the Vietnamese perception of China's policies and led to the adoption of a more robust strategy to protect its interests. China's deployment of gray zone tactics in the maritime domain has prompted Vietnam to enhance its defensive capabilities and maritime presence. The legal framework governing disputes in the South China Sea is deeply rooted in the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which provides the primary international legal basis for resolving maritime disputes. Vietnam has steadfastly relied on this framework to uphold its territorial and maritime claims, employing a multifaceted strategy centered on legal arguments, international cooperation, and the assertion of maritime rights. First and foremost, Vietnam emphasizes the strength of its legal foundation in these disputes. The country asserts that it possesses sufficient historical evidence and a robust legal basis to confirm its sovereignty over the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Islands. Additionally, Vietnam vigorously defends its rights to its exclusive economic zone and continental shelf under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea provisions. These legal claims form the backbone of its stance against external encroachments, particularly those from China. Beyond its legal assertions, Vietnam actively engages in international cooperation to address tensions in the region. The country has been a vocal participant in regional efforts to create a binding regional code of conduct in the South China Sea, aiming to establish clearer guidelines for maritime behavior and conflict resolution. Vietnam's diplomatic approach balances cooperation and resistance, encapsulated in its cooperating and struggling strategy. This involves working with China to de-escalate tensions where possible, while simultaneously taking firm measures to safeguard its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights. Finally, Vietnam has consistently opposed China's sweeping territorial claims, particularly the controversial 9-dash line, which encircles vast portions of the South China Sea, including areas within the Paracel Islands, Spratly Islands, and Scarborough Shoal. To strengthen its position, Vietnam has published 3 significant white papers released in 1979, 1981, and 1988 detailing historical and legal evidence that supports its sovereignty and maritime entitlements. Recent developments show Vietnam adopting a more assertive stance, with enhanced maritime security measures and increased international cooperation. The country has expanded its maritime militia and upgraded commercial fishing vessels to strengthen its presence at sea, while maintaining its commitment to resolving disputes through peaceful means following international law. Vietnam's military modernization efforts have accelerated significantly in recent years, driven by regional security challenges and the need for enhanced defense capabilities. The country's defense budget has shown remarkable growth, with military expenditure projected to reach $10.20 billion by 2029, maintaining a compound annual growth rate of 5.6%. The Vietnamese military's transformation focuses on upgrading its aging equipment and acquiring modern defense systems. Between 2003 and 2018, Vietnam's military expenditure increased by 687%, reflecting the country's commitment to building a robust defense force. Recent acquisitions include 5 T-6C trainer aircraft, first batch of 12 ordered 6-kilo-class submarines equipped with Russian anti-ship cruise missiles, Metal Shark patrol boats for maritime security, and advanced maritime surveillance systems. Vietnam has diversified its defense partnerships beyond traditional allies, marking a significant shift in its military strategy. The United States has emerged as a key partner, demonstrated by the transfer of Hamilton-class cutters to the Vietnam Coast Guard and the delivery of T-6T trainer aircraft. The country maintains defense cooperation with multiple nations while adhering to its four-nose policy: no military alliances, no siding with one country against another, no foreign military bases, and no using force in international relations. Vietnam's deterrence approach emphasizes maritime capabilities, with naval power being the priority focus of its modernization program. The country has allocated approximately $689 million between 2023 and 2028 for artillery systems, while simultaneously developing its maritime domain awareness capabilities. The Vietnamese Air Force has undergone significant modernization, with plans to acquire 12 units of Su-57 aircraft to enhance its aerial combat capabilities. The modernization strategy reflects Vietnam's commitment to developing self-reliant defense capabilities while maintaining regional stability. The country's defense industry is evolving through a three-pronged procurement strategy, focusing on building a dual-use military-industrial complex. This approach aims to reduce dependence on foreign suppliers while strengthening Vietnam's ability to protect its maritime interests and territorial sovereignty. In a strategic shift to diversify its international relationships, Vietnam has embarked on an ambitious diplomatic initiative to strengthen ties beyond its traditional sphere of Chinese influence. The country's diplomatic strategy has yielded significant results through enhanced partnerships with global powers and regional organizations. The elevation of U.S.-Vietnam relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership in September 2023 marked a historic milestone in bilateral cooperation. This partnership encompasses enhanced political and diplomatic relations, strengthened economic cooperation, advanced technology and innovation collaboration, and expanded defense and security ties. The partnership has already shown tangible results, with bilateral trade increasing by 36% since the implementation of recent agreements. The United States has emerged as Vietnam's largest export market, while maintaining a balanced approach to prevent overdependence on any single nation. Vietnam's growing prominence within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has solidified its role as a pivotal player in regional diplomacy. Since joining ASEAN in 1995, a move that notably coincided with the normalization of relations with the United States, Vietnam has leveraged the organization as a cornerstone of its multi-directional foreign policy. This approach has enabled Vietnam to navigate complex geopolitical challenges while advancing its strategic objectives on multiple fronts. Through ASEAN, Vietnam has successfully enhanced its stature as a regional middle power, using its position to mediate and influence key discussions on pressing regional issues. This role has allowed Vietnam to forge strategic alliances aimed at countering external pressures, particularly in the face of rising tensions in the South China Sea. By building coalitions with like-minded nations, Vietnam has strengthened its ability to respond to challenges posed by larger powers in the region. Additionally, Vietnam has actively contributed to the establishment of multilateral cooperation frameworks within ASEAN, emphasizing shared goals of economic growth, security, and stability. These frameworks provide Vietnam with a platform to address common concerns, including maritime security and sustainable development, while fostering deeper ties with its Southeast Asian neighbors. One of the most significant outcomes of Vietnam's active participation in ASEAN has been its ability to amplify its voice in territorial disputes, particularly those involving the South China Sea. ASEAN forums have offered Vietnam a diplomatic stage to rally support for its positions, advocate for a rules-based order, and call for the peaceful resolution of disputes following international law. By integrating its national interests into ASEAN's broader agenda, Vietnam continues to play an instrumental role in shaping the region's diplomatic and security landscape. The EU-Vietnam relationship has developed into a robust partnership, marked by significant diplomatic and economic achievements. Since establishing diplomatic ties in 1990, Vietnam has secured the highest number of agreements with the EU among Southeast Asian nations. Key milestones include the implementation of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement in August 2020 marked a transformative milestone in the partnership between Vietnam and the European Union. By eliminating 99% of all tariffs on goods exchanged between the two sides, the agreement has not only bolstered bilateral trade but also laid the groundwork for a deeper and more comprehensive relationship. Beyond its economic impact, the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement represents a robust framework for cooperation across multiple critical domains, reflecting shared commitments to sustainable development and global governance. In the realm of political cooperation, the partnership has facilitated regular dialogues on security and geopolitical issues, enabling Vietnam and the EU to coordinate responses to global challenges, from maritime security in the South China Sea to broader concerns like regional stability and the rule of law. This engagement underscores the importance of shared values and mutual respect in addressing both bilateral and multilateral concerns. Environmental protection has also emerged as a central pillar of the partnership. Vietnam and the EU have collaborated on initiatives aimed at combating climate change, promoting renewable energy, and ensuring sustainable resource management. These efforts reflect a joint commitment to environmental stewardship in the face of escalating global ecological challenges. Scientific and technological collaboration forms another vital aspect of the relationship. By fostering innovation and knowledge exchange, Vietnam and the EU have strengthened their capacity to address emerging technological trends and challenges, from digital transformation to advancements in healthcare and clean energy. This partnership not only accelerates Vietnam's modernization, but also contributes to global technological progress. Human rights and governance reforms remain a cornerstone of the EU-Vietnam relationship. The two sides have engaged in constructive dialogues and programs aimed at improving governance standards, promoting transparency, and upholding human rights. These efforts highlight the broader aspirations of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, which seeks to integrate economic growth with the principles of social equity and good governance. This diversified diplomatic approach allows Vietnam to maintain its strategic autonomy while developing crucial international partnerships. The country's careful balancing act, exemplified by its bamboo diplomacy, enables it to pursue independent foreign policy objectives while managing complex regional dynamics. Vietnam's strategic push toward economic independence has gained momentum as the nation implements comprehensive measures to reduce its reliance on Chinese markets and investments. The country's GDP growth is projected to reach 6.1% in 2024 and 6.5% in 2025, marking significant progress in its economic diversification efforts. Vietnam's approach to managing Chinese investment reflects a careful balance between opportunity and risk. While Chinese and Hong Kong investments reached $8.20 billion in 2023 across 6,688 projects, Vietnam has actively courted investments from other nations. The quality of Chinese foreign direct investment has evolved, with recent investments including high-tech manufacturing, electric vehicles, and digital economy projects. To mitigate risks, Vietnam has implemented several strategic measures, such as enhanced scrutiny of foreign investments, strengthened regulatory frameworks, diversified investment sources across multiple sectors, and improved investment screening mechanisms. Vietnam's domestic market development strategy focuses on strengthening local production capabilities and consumption. The government has implemented policies to stimulate domestic consumption and investment in areas where local production holds competitive advantages. Key initiatives include: the country's semiconductor industry has emerged as a strategic focus, with several global players, including South Korea's Hana Micron and US-based Amkor Technology, expanding their operations in Vietnam. This sector development aligns with Vietnam's ambition to have its first foundry operational by 2030. The domestic market serves as a reliable foundation for Vietnamese enterprises, offering a multi-layered consumer base. Regional economic development has become a major asset for expanding the domestic market, with the Southeast region emerging as an economic powerhouse featuring large industrial hubs and major seaports. Vietnam's industrial development strategy emphasizes science, technology, innovation, and sustainability. The government has implemented various support measures, including special economic zones, tax incentives, and infrastructure development to strengthen domestic industries. This comprehensive approach aims to transform Vietnam's economy while reducing its historical dependence on Chinese supply chains and markets. The escalating tensions between Vietnam and China have triggered significant shifts in Southeast Asia's security landscape. Vietnam's dramatic acceleration of land reclamation efforts in the South China Sea, creating over 1,000 acres of new territory since early 2024, has reshaped regional power dynamics. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is grappling with mounting challenges in preserving regional stability amidst intensifying great power competition and shifting geopolitical dynamics. The organization's long-standing reliance on consensus building, a hallmark of its decision-making process, has revealed inherent limitations, particularly as member states diverge in their approaches to key issues involving China. These differences have underscored the difficulty of achieving unified stances on contentious matters, such as territorial disputes in the South China Sea, thereby testing ASEAN's cohesion and effectiveness in navigating the region's complexities. One of ASEAN's primary hurdles lies in the varying threat perceptions among its member states. While nations like Vietnam and the Philippines face direct challenges from China's expansive claims in the South China Sea, other members prioritize economic ties with Beijing, creating a patchwork of priorities that complicates collective action. This divergence is further exacerbated by ASEAN's limited capacity to mediate maritime disputes effectively, which undermines its ability to play a decisive role in resolving tensions. The concept of ASEAN centrality, which emphasizes the bloc's position as the driver of regional dialogue and cooperation, is also facing significant strain. As external powers like the United States and China deepen their engagements in Southeast Asia, ASEAN risks being sidelined in favor of bilateral or multilateral arrangements that may better address specific security or economic concerns. Despite these pressures, recent data suggests that Southeast Asian nations have generally refrained from escalating military spending, reflecting a preference for diplomatic efforts over confrontation. The shifting balance of power in the region has also brought about profound changes, particularly in the maritime domain. Vietnam, for instance, has actively expanded its strategic partnerships to bolster its maritime security capabilities. Its deepening ties with the United States have resulted in significant defense cooperation, including the transfer of 2 Coast Guard cutters and the ongoing delivery of 12 training aircraft under a $3 security assistance package. These measures enhance Vietnam's ability to protect its sovereignty and contribute to regional stability. Similarly, Japan has emerged as a key partner for Vietnam, supplying advanced military equipment and fostering closer defense ties. This partnership reflects a broader trend of like-minded nations collaborating to counterbalance China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific. Meanwhile, ASEAN's engagement with China has continued to evolve, with ongoing efforts to establish a binding code of conduct in the South China Sea, although progress remains slow and fraught with challenges. As ASEAN navigates these multifaceted issues, its ability to adapt and assert its relevance will be crucial in shaping the future of regional stability. The bloc's capacity to balance great power dynamics, address internal divisions, and reinforce its centrality in the Indo-Pacific will determine whether it can maintain its role as a linchpin of peace and cooperation in Southeast Asia. Vietnam's approach to coalition building reflects a careful balance between assertiveness and restraint. The country has strengthened security cooperation with multiple partners, including the United States, Japan, and Australia, all of whom upgraded ties with Vietnam over the past 10 months. However, Vietnam's strategic position remains complex, sharing an 800-mile land border with China, its largest trading partner. Recent developments indicate that Vietnam is pursuing a hedging strategy rather than direct alignment with any single power. This approach allows flexibility in responding to regional challenges while maintaining strategic autonomy. The country's military modernization and diplomatic initiatives have enhanced its position as a significant player in regional security architecture. Maritime security cooperation has emerged as a focal point for coalition building, with Japan selling military ships and equipment to both Vietnam and the Philippines to improve their maritime security capabilities. These developments suggest an evolving security framework that extends beyond traditional bilateral relationships to encompass broader regional partnerships. Public sentiment in Vietnam reveals a complex interplay between historical grievances and contemporary tensions with China, manifesting through widespread protests and online activism. Recent surveys indicate that Vietnamese public opinion remains predominantly hostile towards China, with polls showing significant levels of distrust toward Beijing's strategic intentions. The past decade has witnessed recurring waves of anti-China demonstrations across Vietnam, marking significant shifts in public expression of nationalist sentiments. A major protest erupted in 2014 when China deployed an oil rig in disputed waters, leading to unprecedented nationwide demonstrations. The scale of these demonstrations was extraordinary, with over 20,000 workers taking to the streets across Binh Duong province alone. The unrest escalated into violence, with 15 foreign-owned factories set ablaze in industrial parks and hundreds of Chinese nationals evacuated from the country. The protests continued to evolve, with another significant wave occurring in 2018 when hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese citizens demonstrated against a proposed special economic zones law that many feared would benefit Chinese investors. These demonstrations reflected deep-seated concerns about Chinese economic influence. In 2016, a year-long series of environmental protests erupted following the Formosa steel plant disaster, which was linked to a Taiwanese company but fueled by broader anxieties about foreign exploitation of Vietnam's resources. The protests intensified again in 2018 when hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese citizens opposed a proposed special economic zones law that many feared would disproportionately benefit Chinese investors. The demonstrations reached every major city, further emphasizing widespread distrust of Chinese influence. In 2019, tensions resurfaced over the Vanguard Bank standoff, sparking additional public outcry. The rise of digital platforms has fundamentally transformed how Vietnamese nationalism manifests online. Facebook and Zalo, Vietnam's homegrown social network, have become primary channels for expressing anti-China sentiments. The impact of social media on public opinion is evident through uncensored public commentary during periods of tension, the circulation of demonstration calls and protest videos, the creation of workarounds to censorship measures, and the sharing of anti-China content across platforms. Vietnamese cyber users have increasingly utilized social media to share anti-China sentiments and organize demonstrations, particularly during maritime disputes. During the 2014 oil rig crisis, social media platforms facilitated nationwide protests that continued for 2 months in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. The Vietnamese government has adopted a sophisticated approach to managing public sentiment, balancing nationalist expression with diplomatic necessities. This cooperation and struggle strategy involves careful calibration between containing public displays of nationalism while maintaining relations with China. These responses can be understood as a series of calculated phases, tailored to address both domestic and international considerations while preserving political stability. Initially, the government displayed a degree of tolerance toward peaceful protests, recognizing their potential as a demonstration of national resolve against Chinese actions. This approach allowed citizens to express their concerns and reaffirm Vietnam's stance on sovereignty issues, such as territorial disputes in the South China Sea. For example, during the 2014 oil rig crisis, early protests were permitted as a show of unity and defiance against perceived Chinese aggression. However, as demonstrations grew larger and risked escalating into unrest, the government imposed stricter restrictions to prevent them from spiraling out of control. This shift often occurred when protests began to threaten public safety, disrupt economic activity, or attract unwanted international scrutiny. The government's ability to swiftly clamp down on escalating demonstrations underscores its prioritization of social order over prolonged public dissent. In certain cases, the government has employed a more nuanced approach by selectively allowing controlled protests under official supervision. This tactic enables the authorities to manage the scale and tone of the demonstrations while mitigating potential risks. Controlled protests serve as a means to channel public frustration in a measured way, maintaining a semblance of civic engagement without jeopardizing stability. Simultaneously, the government has strategically utilized state media to shape public opinion and direct the narrative surrounding sensitive issues. By framing protests in ways that align with national interests, the state ensures that public sentiment remains constructive and avoids fueling divisions. Vietnamese authorities have demonstrated increasing sophistication in managing online nationalism. The state has allowed ongoing nationalistic discourse on social media and criticism of China's naval actions in official news outlets while maintaining strict control over public demonstrations. However, this approach faces challenges, as evidenced by the 2014 riots, when protests escalated beyond government control, resulting in property damage and casualties. The Communist Party of Vietnam maintains a delicate balance between allowing public expression of anti-China sentiment and preventing escalation that could damage bilateral relations. Recent data shows that Vietnamese media authorities typically greenlight criticism of China, specifically on maritime territorial disputes and Mekong River issues, while maintaining stricter control over other aspects of the bilateral relationship. The government's management strategy includes selective permission for peaceful demonstrations, strict control over protest scope and duration, strategic use of state media to shape public narrative, and careful monitoring of social media platforms. This complex dynamic has created what analysts describe as a dual approach toward nationalism and territorial disputes. While allowing certain forms of public expression, the Vietnamese government has maintained measured official responses to Chinese actions since 2014. This careful balancing act reflects the broader challenges Vietnam faces in managing public sentiment while maintaining stable relations with its powerful neighbor. Vietnam's shift away from Chinese influence is reshaping Southeast Asian geopolitics, signaling a bold determination to protect its sovereignty and diversify its alliances. By strengthening its defense capabilities, broadening trade partnerships, and deepening diplomatic ties with the US, EU, and ASEAN, Vietnam is reducing its economic reliance on China while enhancing its regional standing. Public concerns about Chinese territorial expansion, particularly in the South China Sea, continue to drive these strategic changes, rooted in centuries of complex history between the two nations. As Vietnam carefully balances independence with regional stability, will this approach lead to long-term security and prosperity? How can Vietnam further leverage its alliances to maintain sovereignty while avoiding confrontation? Please share your views on this issue and also share your feelings about these two Asian countries in the comments section. We would love it if you leave a comment before you leave. Thank you for watching the video till the end.